Our Meredith Anderson talked with Senator Jon Ossoff to get exclusive details about a new child enrichment center at Fort Gordon. Senator Ossoff secured $26 million in funding for the center, which will be for kids ranging from 6 weeks to 5 years old. They also cover a number of other topics in this wide-ranging interview, including brawls at a youth challenge academy on Post.
Your team tells me you have some very good news to pass along, which is nice because sometimes when we talk about Fort Gordon, it's not the best of news.
I've got good news for military families on Post and around Fort Gordon. I'm expanding the child care facilities on Post to serve military families. I've just secured $26 million in legislation passed with Republican and Democratic support in December to expand the child development centers available to military families at Fort Gordon.
That's a lot of money. Do you know specifically how that funds will be used? Is it all for the building facilities? Is it for technology? Is it for programs?
Most of these resources will go to the construction of new daycare facilities to serve military families on Post at Fort Gordon. And some will go to the planning of future construction so that we can continue to expand the child care facilities available to those military families.
Do you have the plans for any of what these facilities might look like, or is it still in just the very early stages where you've just secured the funding for it?
We do have those plans, which we secured from the Department of Defense, and this is going to help hundreds of children access these daycare facilities. This is about quality of life for, in particular, our junior enlisted personnel. Whenever I visit installations across Georgia, I try to sit down with those junior enlisted personnel, those young military families who are making such sacrifices to defend our country and often don't have access to the child care facilities that they need. That's why I made this a priority. And I brought Republicans and Democrats both together in the Senate to deliver these resources to expand child care at Fort Gordon.
I know that you've spent a lot of time on Post and that you've tried to tour as many of the facilities as you can. And I know a lot of times, especially with housing, there's been a major roadblock there. Have you been able to tour the facilities that Fort Gordon currently has? Have you been able to take a look at those? And can you talk about the need for the expansion of what's currently there?
Well, I've visited child development centers at installations across Georgia, and I've heard directly from military families at Fort Gordon that child care is a basic need and one that needs to be more fully met. I want every child in the state of Georgia and every family in the state of Georgia to have access to great child care. Our military families can't be overlooked. As you know, I am a strong and constant supporter of the military community around Augusta and the military families at Fort Gordon. That's why I led a long-term investigation of housing conditions for those families, and it's why I'm expanding child care facilities to serve those families. And Meredith, I really want to emphasize this because I think it's an important point. As divided as things seem in Congress, I brought Republicans and Democrats together to get this done for military families at Fort Gordon. Bipartisan solutions to the problems faced by military families every day.
And it's interesting that you brought up the investigation into military housing at Fort Gordon, and we've covered those problems at length here at our station. We've gone in depth into some of the issues there. Of course, your PSI investigation and the hearing in April. But it's important to point out that this facility is not one of the Balfour Beatty run facilities. This is not a company, this private company will not have any hand in this child enrichment center. I just want to make sure that that's very clear, correct?
That's correct. These are separate issues. But of course, quality of life for military families has to be looked at comprehensively. So while I continue to work consistently to improve housing conditions on Post at Fort Gordon, I'm also now expanding the child care facilities available to the families on Post because military families deserve the best.
Just in the event anyone was wondering if Balfour Beatty would be managing or any part of this construction, it's important to kind of make sure that they know that This is not one of the Balfour Beatty issues. But speaking to another issue that has come up at Fort Gordon, the Youth Challenge Academy has been in the news recently. The AJC has exposed some major problems there. We've also been investigating some of the problems there and have had some of the youth speak out about the brawl and some of the injuries they sustained during that brawl. What have you been able to find out? Because I know that your office has been looking into that as well.
Well, I've had a conversation with senior command level in the Guard, and the facts as you laid them out are what I understand. There was a violent incident at this program, which disrupted the program. My office has pursued some specific requests for information on behalf of constituents related to this matter. Because those are confidential services we're providing to constituents, and in particular because they involve children, I can't get into those details. We want young people in Georgia to have access to programs that give them an opportunity to access skills and turn their lives around if they're struggling. But of course, those programs need to be run in a way that is safe.
There had been mention of some money that had been secured as well for the National Guard. Did that have anything to do with the Youth Challenge Academy?
Another bipartisan initiative that I led and delivered on for Fort Gordon and for Guard and Reserve units in the area and across the state is to begin the process of building this new Guard and Reserve Center on post at Fort Gordon to better serve our Guard and Reserve units.
What would that center entail? What are some of the things that money would go towards? What would a facility be? Would it just be a new home for them? Would it be a place where they would train? I'm kind of unclear on what that facility would be.
This will provide new training facilities for Guard and Reserve units who train at Fort Gordon, as well as the provision of services to Guard and Reserve component members. I honor and thank all Georgians who serve in the Guard or in the Reserves and want to make sure that they have access to world-class facilities because they are an integral part of our armed forces and essential to our national security.
Is there any update on the military housing now that I have you here? Any updates on the investigation? I know that you have reached out to the Department of the Army, the Department of Defense. You have been trying to get updates on their investigation into Fort Gordon, the ones that they launched a day after your hearing exposed everything that the PSI was able to find. Have you heard any updates? Has anyone contacted you since you sent those letters?
They have. We have heard back. We have substantial responses from the U.S. Army that my staff and I are still reviewing. And in the near future, Meredith, I'll have some important updates to share with you as I continue my work to ensure that families on and around Fort Gordon have access to housing that is safe, that keeps their children safe, and that is up to the standards that military families deserve. I'm not letting up on this. I'm going to keep at it, and I'm going to hold the Army and the contractor accountable to ensure that military families are safe.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Senator. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
We're hoping to soon have more detailed plans on exactly what that center will look like. Meredith will have another update coming up on News 12 at 6 o'clock.